Now getting a chance to speak with Riley Mack. Riley was inside the courtroom when the judge did declare a mistrial. Riley, talk about that moment. What happened?
You guys, you could hear a pin drop in that courtroom. It was completely silent. From the moment I walked in nearly to the end, there was, just everyone was silent. There were some, shakes of the head after this came out. And, this is honestly a decision that no one is really happy with. It just feels like, I think the feeling in that courtroom is that, what was the point of all of this? It's been, 20-ish hours of jury deliberation, and no decision to come out of that. I was sitting there in the third row of the courtroom. I was sitting behind Patrick Loyoya's family. They didn't say anything. It was just complete silence. There was some Schurr's family, Schurr's loved ones were praying right before, the judge spoke. And, this is a decision that nobody is really happy about in there. It was very obvious. Complete silence. No reaction, honestly. This is kind of what we, having the jury in deadlock, 10 hours ago, people thought that they could come to a decision after this, but we've sat with the jury now 20 hours of deliberation and they got nothing out of it. Now, honestly, the case just goes back to Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker, and it's up to him whether this case is going to be retried, whether we go through this same thing over again. For now, no reaction from the courtroom.
Yeah, Riley, while we have you, and again, I want to be clear for our audience, we are waiting on a press conference here after we learned this result of a mistrial in the Christopher Schurr trial. But you have been covering this inside the courtroom day in and day out since day number one on our live blog. I'm curious, what has that been like? And then to see all of the testimony that we have seen up until now to get this result, I mean, as somebody who's been in the courtroom every single day with those supporters on either side, is this a shock to you, or is this kind of something that you were anticipating the entire time? I mean, the testimony at some points did get very confusing.
Yeah. It did, absolutely. That's such a great question. I think it's not so much a surprise since we heard that the jury was in deadlock, 2 days ago. We heard that and we considered this as a possibility. I will say it is kind of an underwhelming ending to such a, we had a back and forth going during those testimonies. The cross-examination could get really contentious at points. And, this is a case that people really care about on both sides. People are up in arms about their side in this case. It honestly, like I said, just feels like an underwhelming end to such a case that caused so much strife in Grand Rapids. Being here since the beginning, it would have been nice to say that there was a conclusion to this trial, that there was a verdict that came out of this. But I think this goes to show that both of the attorneys put forward a really great case for their side if the jury could not come to a decision on that. And it's obvious that the jury, really cared about this case, that they could go back and forth on these issues for 20 hours of deliberation, and in the end come up with nothing.
Yeah.
And Riley, what about when people were leaving the courtroom? We actually saw you leaving the courtroom as people were heading outside of the courtroom. Were people rushing out? Were the families trying to kind of gathering together? What was that, process after being able to leave that courtroom?
Absolutely. Some supporters of Justice for Patrick Loyoya were in the courtroom. They had a little bit of an outburst at the end. One supporter, said something about one of the jury members possibly being biased, and they were kind of, there were 9 Kent County Sheriff deputies inside the courtroom, and one of them said, "Okay, it's time for you to go." So all of the Loyoya supporters kind of left at once, along with the Loyoya family. Christopher Schurr and his family stayed behind, though. We saw them leaving probably 5-10 minutes after that decision came out. We came in the courtroom at 9:30. We were called in for a possible decision. The judge said mistrial at 9:55, I believe. So in 25 minutes, this case of weeks and years, honestly, in preparation is just over just like that. Yeah, Christopher Schurr's family left, a few minutes after that. I believe they're gone from the courthouse completely. So yeah, everybody left pretty immediately after that.
Yeah, and again, I think you put it best, kind of an underwhelming end to the case after all of that testimony we heard, all of the exhibits admitted into evidence in this, and again, some of the not controversial, but contradictory testimonies we heard on both sides as both sides were trying to make their argument. It's no wonder that we had a jury that couldn't come to a decision here, because at the end of the day, no matter what your perceived bias as you are walking to the courtroom is, I think, it would be not surprising to see this outcome.